it's really up to them. You know, they've been talking about DACA for many years, and they haven't produced.
The president's framework is not an opening bid. It is a best and final offer.
Republicans want to know why Susan Rice sent herself an email. The email emphasizes President Obama told all involved to proceed, quote, by the book.
I think that's odd and disturbing because we know that the investigation regarding the Trump campaign, it was an abuse of power, not by the book.
The Justice Department may have overruled the FBI in the Michael Flynn case.
James Comey briefed Congress, and he said the FBI agents who interviewed Flynn did not think he lied to them. Something happened between then and December 1st when he pleaded guilty to lying.
Thousands gathering to kick off Mardi Gras celebrations. People from all around the world come into that city. It is a day to feast before fasting for Easter.
Yeah, I know USA's in the title, but this is the third time we're opening up.
Third time in like a matter of 2 weeks, right?
And then we have the John Mellencamp, John Cougar debate.
Maybe,
because we have the number what?
New.
I'm wearing different glasses.
That's right.
You know, I was wearing contacts for a while, but now with the glasses, I can see so much clearer. You've got black hair. I thought you were the younger guy. Holy cow.
Do you remember the first time if you wear contacts, you probably remember this moment when you go to the doctor and you start driving out of the parking lot and you look, you're like, these are leaves? This is what a leaf looks like? You can see the trees clearly. It's the best feeling.
It wasn't quite like that, but they were a little dry. So anyway, I'm branching out. Right. Good morning to you.
Branching out, no pun intended.
Good one. All right. Meanwhile, let's talk about some things in the news. Okay, so just imagine. Let's take you back to last year. It is 12:15 on Donald Trump's inauguration day. And what was Susan Rice doing at that time, the outgoing national security chief? Well, she was writing a memo that essentially said, hey, we didn't break the law. We did everything by the books.
Right. It's so interesting because she writes on January 20th, and I'm not saying I have the answers to this. All you have is conjecture, but we might be getting to some answers. It says this. President Obama, she wrote this about a January 5th meeting. President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement communities by the book. The president stressed that he is not asking about initiating or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as it normally would by the book.
All right, so she's basically saying we did everything by the book.
Right.
This was an email that she sent to herself on the day that President Trump was inaugurated.
That's normal.
About a meeting 15 days before,
right,
saying this is what President Obama briefed us on.
Right.
Who was in the meeting? President Obama, Joe Biden, the vice president at the time, FBI Director James Comey, and the Deputy AG, Sally Yates.
That's right. There's some of the people in attendance right there. And so it is just so curious that as she is leaving, perhaps one of her last acts in the White House, she writes herself an email and emails it to herself that says, we did not break the law. Senator Lindsey Graham, along with Charles Grassley, wrote Mrs. Rice a letter and said, hey, we've got some questions for you. For instance, did you know that the dossier was used to obtain the FISA warrant against Carter Page at that time? Also, did anyone instruct you to write that particular letter? She's got, I believe, just another week or two to respond
and how about
to their questions.
Why did you write yourself an email 15 days after the meeting of notes that happened inside that meeting? And keep in mind, that meeting took place on January 5th,
yep,
and that was the same day that Comey briefed President Obama on what they were investigating, the Russia Trump campaign collusion.
Here's Senator Lindsey Graham yesterday with Martha McCallum.
What I'm worried about is it's an effort by the president to basically get himself on the record through Susan Rice to make sure that, from his point of view, everything was done by the book. The question is, did the president know anything about the FISA warrant application? Did Susan Rice know that the warrant application included a dossier from Mr. Steele when he was on the payroll of the Democratic Party coming from Russian sources, and that the information in the FISA warrant application was a dossier that was political in nature, and that Mr. Steele hated President Trump, candidate Trump, and was trying to do everything he could to beat him. That's not exactly by the book.
So It's so interesting. They wrote the National Archives and said, you know, we need anything, he and Senator Grassley, anything related to this investigation as it relates to both administrations, can you bring it forward? And again, Susan Rice is right in the middle of this big mystery, and she is either forced to go front another story, which is not true, but now she's got to define that story, and I'm wondering why they keep going back to the term by the book.
Because that means they didn't break any rules. But here's the thing.
But does that mean that? Or they mean,
that's
don't
what
even
she
think.
wants you to know, Brian. By the book.
By the
We did
book.
everything. By the book.
Look,
He told us to do it by the book.
Was it a memo to inoculate everybody in that room from future generations or future investigations? We don't know. But did you notice? It sounds like Barack Obama knew all about the dossier at the time, right? What did he know? Why hasn't he been queried about it? And keep in mind, when you are the president of the United States, you are the leader of your political party. And who paid for the dossier?
Democratic Party, which was
Hillary
funded by
Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
Meanwhile, the DNC,
right,
which he would ultimately head up.
As we know later from Donna Brazil's book, was totally bailed out by the Hillary Clinton campaign, therefore they were subservient to Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, let's talk about this other blockbuster story in my mind. Byron York, yesterday in the Washington Examiner, talked about a story that's out today that says that his sources have told him that James Comey, when he was still in the job, told at least 2 other people that from his perspective, Michael Flynn did not lie to the FBI.
That's right. Regarding the meetings that he may have had, that he did have with the Russian ambassador. Byron's piece also goes on to say that even if he did talk about sanctions or anything else, that would not have been against the law. Nonetheless, these lawmakers who were briefed on it, after they heard from James Comey, it's like, okay, this guy's not going to be charged. A couple weeks later, he's charged. What happened? That's the big question.
All right, so let's read what the Washington Examiner is reporting based on their sources inside that meeting in March. You have these lawmakers that went to Comey, and they said, we want to be briefed. Tell us what's happening. Is Michael Flynn guilty or not? And this is what sources inside that meeting said. According to 2 sources familiar with the meetings, Comey told lawmakers that the FBI agents who interviewed Flynn did not believe that Flynn had lied to them, or that any inaccuracies in his answers were intentional. As a result, some of those in attendance came away with the impression that Flynn would not be charged for the crime. 9 months later, with Comey gone and special counsel Robert Mueller in charge of the Trump-Russia investigation, Flynn pleaded guilty to 1 count of making false statements to the FBI in that January 24th questioning. So just like the title of Hillary's book, people want to know what happened.
So the question is to reframe the whole thing, you know, after 8 years of really doing nothing against Russia while they take over the Ukraine, while they fly into the Middle East, the administration suddenly gets tough 3 weeks before they're done, finished through, and they put sanctions on Russia for meddling in the election. So evidently, on some level, Michael Flynn has a meeting with the Ambassador Kislyak and says, listen, don't overreact to these sanctions. We're going to take over. We're going to re-examine this whole thing. And by the way, Russia didn't. Steve Hadley used to have that job that Michael Flynn had for 24 days and said, I don't see what's wrong if Flynn simply said, look, don't retaliate. Doesn't make sense. It hurts my country. It makes it harder for us as an incoming administration to reconsider Russian policy. So the question is, he didn't tell President Trump about it. That's a mistake. Right. And didn't tell the vice president about it. That was a mistake. But nothing to really get you kicked out of the job.
Well, he pleaded guilty to making false statements to the FBI.
Here's what it ultimately boils down to. You have James Comey, the head of the FBI. He said, didn't look like he lied to us. And yet, was he overruled by somebody at the Department of Justice? Keep in mind, at this time, Sally Yates, then the Deputy Attorney General, she thought he might have broken the Logan Act and was susceptible to blackmail. So did she push that? We don't know. All we know is that James Comey said, yeah, we don't think he did anything wrong. And yet, he wound up pleading guilty.
The president at one point said, hey, go easy with the general. He's a good guy. And Comey answered, yeah, he is a good guy.
All right.
Meanwhile, 6:10 in New York City and down in Washington, same time, dreaming of a DACA deal. The U.S. Senate now gripped by a historic debate on immigration, and the president wants them to get a deal done. He tweeted moments ago, negotiations on DACA have begun. Republicans want to make a deal, and Democrats say they want to make a deal. Wouldn't it be great if we could finally, after so many years, solve the DACA puzzle? This will be our last chance. There will never be another opportunity. March 5th is the deadline.
Both sides expected to be back at it first thing this morning, but can anything come of it?
Is Griff Jenkins here?
He's there.
So. There he is.
He's on TV.
Hi, Griff.
He's not
Good
here.
morning.
He's in Washington.
Oh.
That's right. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
I don't know. Clock is ticking, and it's not entirely clear that Minority Leader Chuck Schumer understands that they're supposed to be negotiating, because while they try to figure this out with some deal on DACA and a wall, here is what Schumer says he wants to narrow the focus.
Now is not the time nor the place to reform the entire legal immigration system. Rather, this is the moment for a narrow bill.
Whatever they come up with, it has to have 60 votes to pass, and the president has to be willing to sign it. And so a group of 7 GOP senators say their plan is the best chance at it. It has a path to citizenship for the Dreamers in exchange for $25 billion for border security and a wall. It limits chain migration in the visa lottery system. And Senator Tom Cotton, one of those 7 senators, says we don't need Schumer to do it.
Dick Durbin and Chuck Schumer shut down the government over a no-strings-attached amnesty for illegal immigrants, and that didn't go so well for them. We don't have to have the blessing of Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin to pass a bill.
Now, Senator Cotton's coming up here at 8 o'clock with you guys, and it's going to be interesting to see what he has to say. This is an open-ended, rare debate. It could last all week, even all month possibly, but with Senator Schumer saying he doesn't necessarily want to negotiate, it's going to be very interesting, guys.
And John Cornyn apparently said yesterday he'd like it wrapped up by the end of the week, so stay tuned.
Thank you. A little difference. All right. Okay.
Thanks, Griff.
Meanwhile, where's Jillian?
I'm over here.
Hi, Jillian.
Hi, guys.
She's here.
Good morning.
Griff,
I feel
she's here.
I feel like we look like Valentine's Day already. A day early for this.
Pink and red.
Good morning, guys. To you at home as well. Let's get right to a Fox News alert. Out of Detroit, Michigan, right now, where 3 women are killed and 3 police officers are hurt during a 14-hour standoff. 49-year-old Lance Smith barricaded himself inside his home after a fight with his girlfriend. He shot and killed her and 2 of her family members, then turned the gun on himself. Before that, he was firing at police for nearly an hour, hitting 3 in the legs.
Pray for Detroit Police Department, all first responders, because we live in some trying times right now.
All of those officers will make a full recovery. Donald Trump Jr. speaking out after his wife was rushed to the hospital after opening a letter stuffed with white powder. The envelope was addressed to the president's son. As news broke, Twitter filled with hateful comments like this, quote, tragic that Jr. didn't open it. Don Jr. responding, tweeting, quote, truly disgusting that certain individuals choose to express their opposing views with such disturbing behavior. The substance turned out to be cornstarch. Vanessa Trump was not harmed. Let's look at your headlines, guys. I'll send it back to you.
Hope they find the person who did that.
too.
That's
Ridiculous.
just wrong. Thank you very much, Jillian.
Thank you.
All right, it's 6:13 in New York City. President Trump says it's time to drain the swamp inside our intel agencies. So who needs to go? Former CIA officer Buck Sexton on that. He's reporting for duty live in the studio. Good morning, Buck.
And forget the lift. This Olympic skier found a new way to the top.
That's awesome.
Glad you're up. Hope you're dressed. President Trump railing against various intel agencies and the need to, quote, drain the swamp. So who are the president's so-called enemies inside our intelligence agencies or players? We're asking former CIA analyst Buck Sexton. Buck, you've agreed to join us. Thank you so much.
See you guys.
First off, there's our title. Let's get started. Here are the 4 people that matter most. Christopher Steele, James Comey, Peter Strzok, and John Brennan. Where should we start?
Well, I like to think of this as an injustice league of anti-Trumpers. These are all people that had key access at important points in the entire Russia-Trump collusion narrative, and all also have an anti-Trump animus. They don't like Donald Trump. And when you're talking about some of these folks, like, for example, Christopher Steele, fine, he is a gun for hire. He's essentially a glorified private investigator in this context. But he has been involved at every step of the way of manufacturing this Russia collusion narrative.
What I find amazing is he seems to have disappeared. He doesn't want to speak to us. He doesn't want to speak to the British. He never went to Russia. Kind of strange. Let's go back to the big four. Let's go to Comey.
Well, James Comey, we know a lot more about, I think, since he left the FBI when it comes to this part of the investigation and what's been going on here. He certified 3 of those FISA requests. By the way, until we get more information, which we might from the Democrat memo if it gets released in the next few days, it looks like it was based largely on that dossier. And Comey would know that's an incredibly flimsy pretext for that kind of surveillance. And also now we know he doesn't like Trump very much either.
Right. Now we know, too, he also didn't come clean on how many times he met with President Obama in front of congressional testimony. We'll see if he can clarify that. Now, Peter Strzok.
Now, this is the FBI agent that we've been talking about here for a while who made it quite clear that he doesn't like Trump. In fact, he doesn't even like Trump voters. And he was involved in both the Hillary email investigation, perhaps crafting the very language that really exonerated her in effect. And he's somebody who was involved in Russia collusion and seemed to express some of his reservations about whether there was a there. So he's a critical figure in this.
Buck, we also have to bring up he's one who spoke to Michael Flynn.
That's right.
And he's somebody that was kicked out by Robert Mueller, but the IG report was the one that revealed to Mueller that he might have had some bias. We back to the final one, John Brennan, CIA director.
Director of my former home agency here, former director. But look, he's a close Obama ally, also known to cultivate people in the press that he wants to get his message out to while he was director. And he's somebody who is clearly tied into very important points in the investigation, specifically the notion of Russia collusion in the beginning. I mean, he was giving briefings to people. He was involved in that intel agency process. And what's interesting is when we look back at his testimony now, it doesn't look like what Brennan was saying months ago about what he knew and when he knew it about the Russia collusion investigation lines up with what we're told now. We got more questions for the former director.
You're the expert, but when I see James Clapper and John Brennan speak about President Trump, I see almost a personal protection element to it. Like, don't look too far. I might not look too good if examined too much.
What we're seeing here are a number of very senior officials, like I said, you could call it an injustice league, who now that we're seeing more of the information behind the investigation, it looks like they were either abusing their discretion or working in a concerted effort to at least cover up for some of what had already been done in this investigation.
Good job, Buck Sexton.
Hey, great to see you.
Great to see you.
As always, thank you.
That's the inside. That's a competency on the Russian probe, which is not going away. Meanwhile, while the media gushes over Kim Jong-un's sister, 3 Americans are being held prisoner by the rogue nation, including the father of our next guest.
As you gather with your family and friends to watch the Olympics, will you remember my dad, Tony Kim? My dad was arrested last April in North Korea, and we don't know what has happened to him.
His urgent plea when he joins us next live. Don't miss it. Quick headlines now. The convicted Chelsea bomber will be sentenced today, facing life in federal prison. Ahmad Rahimi's father even called him a terrorist, telling NBC in an interview that he warned the FBI 2 years ago before the attacks. And the 30-year-old is convicted of setting off 2 bombs in New Jersey and New York City in 2016, hurt 31 people. And this man could face more terrorism charges after being already convicted of supporting ISIS. This according to CBS Baltimore. Prosecutors are trying to convince a judge that Mohammed Ashanawi was planning a major attack, hoping to detonate a bomb to kill a lot of people in Maryland. A judge will decide this week whether or not to enhance his charges. I say yes. Stephen Ainsley?
All right, Brian, thank you. Mainstream media continuing to fawn over brutal dictator Kim Jong-un's sister at the Olympics, even comparing her to Ivanka Trump. But just a few miles away from the stadium, 3 American citizens remain detained by North Koreans. The son of an American currently imprisoned in North Korea is pleading for those watching the games to not forget about his dad.
As you gather with your family and friends to watch the Olympics, will you remember my dad, Tony Kim? My dad was arrested last April in North Korea, and we don't know what has happened to him. Tony is actually one of the 3 Americans being held captive in North Korea, just miles from the Olympic stadiums.
Joining us now to share his story is Sol Kim. He is the son of Tony Kim, who has been detained since last April. He is fighting to bring his dad home. Sol, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, and
You're welcome.
thank you for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome. Tell us what happened to your dad.
From what I know, he was at Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, leaving April 22nd, 2017 to come back. And, he was detained in the airport. He was arrested. After that, there hasn't been any trial, no accusations. And yeah, I don't know too much.
Yeah. So your father was teaching at Pyongyang University, Science and Technology. He has been charged by the North Koreans with committing criminal acts of hostility aimed to overturn North Korea. It's hard to understand that, but what do you think they're talking about with that charge?
To be honest, I'm not sure. Sorry.
Well, to be honest, neither are we.
We know what's happened to other Americans that have gone to North Korea, and always the question is, why do you think your dad wanted to go there, knowing Kim Jong-un's past, knowing he's a dictator? Why was your dad there?
Well, he was there at the university teaching, and I would say, if my dad saw a need, he'd be someone to want to go help.
Sure. Well, Sol, you're appearing today because you know that a lot of people are watching the Olympics that are based in South Korea, and you are among a number of people who have started a free USA 3 program where people hold up 3 fingers to symbolize what?
Symbolize just to American the 3 different detainees that are there. There's my father and 2 others. I'm just trying to bring up awareness for all of them. It wasn't until perhaps my dad was detained that I cared. So, while I can, I'm hoping that more and more Americans and U.S. government just won't forget them. And just say, hey, any help that we can get.
I know it's so hard. I can't imagine what you're going through, especially not knowing. Have you heard anything over the last 8 months, or have you heard from the president?
No, I mean, the last I've heard about my father was about 8 months ago. And even that was very little. I mean, I was told that he's doing okay, he looks healthy. But of course, when family was brought up, he looked a little distressed. And so, I guess as a family, we're very curious to kind of hear how he's doing, and just let him know that, soon he'll be a grandfather.
Well, that's wonderful news for your younger brother. His family is expecting a baby. You want to be a teacher just like your father as well. What do you want people to know about your dad as they go ahead and start the free USA 3 campaign where people start going like that all across the country?
I mean, we all have fathers, so we all know kind of what they mean to us. Me and my family, we love him, and we'd like to see him. We miss him, and just hoping he's safe.
Well, we hope he comes back. We'll all be praying that he does, and we're standing with you, holding up our 3 fingers. Thank you so much, Sol, for being with us. Keep us posted,
Thank
okay?
you.
For more information, go to freeusa3.com.
A school Valentine's Day dance causing heartburn. 6th graders told that they can't say no if they get asked to go to the dance. Wait until you hear the ridiculous reason.
And a big win for patriotism. The U.S. women's hockey team gets to keep the Statue of Liberty on their helmets after the International Olympic Committee called it too political. Ravens tight end Benjamin Watson's going to join us on the Curvy Couch to talk about that as Brian comes down the stairs. But first, happy birthday to Peter Gabriel. He is 68 today.
Of all the fruitless searches, oh, I see the light and the heat. Take it easy.
That is impressive, but don't try that unless you're an Olympian. That's your shot of the morning, a Swiss Olympic skier escalating the competition at the Winter Games, riding that escalator by dangling off the side with one hand.
That is a fellow by the name of Fabian Bosch taking the unconventional route while exploring the Olympic Village in South Korea, riding on the outside of the escalator going up.
All right, that is harder than a double axle. In a post on Instagram, he says after 20 years, he still can't figure out how these things work.
Wait, I want to
Very
see when
funny.
he gets to the top what he does. Does he
Right,
like
no, yeah, watch. He
catapult over?
flips and he sits on the edge. Watch
And the guy next to him, no expression,
See?
doesn't
Right.
even care.
I'm afraid to walk backwards on an escalator.
Oh, we didn't
stopped
see
the
the-
video.
That was impressive.
Benjamin,
Yeah,
watch.
that's why they're Olympic athletes.
I know.
Right there.
That's why we don't have an escalator.
Exactly.
You could do that in
No,
NFL.
but watch at the end. Just watch the end. He ends
I
up
wanna see
sitting
what he
on the
does.
ledge. It's very impressive.
I think
and
we
hops
stopped
right
the
over.
video.
No, we don't. I actually saw it complete.
Okay.
But when did he start
Let's see.
practicing that? That's
Right.
Watch this.
All right.
Watch this. There you
Oh,
go.
And
my
then he just
word.
jumps over it.
Wow, it makes
That's
it so easy.
amazing.
Benjamin Watson, tight end for the Baltimore Ravens and the author of Under Our Skin, joins us right now. Benjamin, good morning to you.
Good morning.
There was a political brouhaha this morning. Apparently, the International Olympic Committee asked the U.S. ladies hockey team for the goalies to remove their helmets because they had the Statue of Liberty, said they didn't want anything political. They apparently, in the last hour, have changed their minds and allow them to wear it. But still, considering that they're in Korea, South Korea, where the North Korea marched in under the same flag, there's a lot of symbolism over there right now.
There is, but I would imagine the IOC is something like the NFL. There's certain protocols for what you can wear and what you can't wear. The crazy thing to me is that it wasn't approved beforehand. So I don't know all the details, but I do know sometimes if you show up with something that is not regulation for a uniform, there's going to be a process through that. But I am glad they're allowed to wear it.
Right. I mean, it'd be different if it, if it said a point of view like fascism sucks or something like that. But I mean, we pretty much know the Statue of Liberty stands for America.
Well, in the rule book for the IOC, it says something to the effect of images, messaging that has to do with national identity outside of the colors of the uniform. So, again, this is a uniform thing. I am glad they resolved it. Now we can go on and hopefully win the gold medal.
Especially in your league, they're very tight on that.
Exactly.
All right, so after the Super Bowl, Eagles win. They're all invited to the White House. There's one player, Malcolm Jenkins, who is snubbing the invitation, says he's not going to go.
Yeah, well, there's more than one player.
There's three.
Yeah, there's three players. But this is not a new thing. Since 1980, when teams first started coming to the White House, being invited by the president, there's been a number of players who haven't come for various reasons. I remember Matt Burke, who was a Baltimore Raven before I was, a guy I greatly respect, and he didn't go to Obama to see Obama because of Obama's stance on abortion. So there are many different reasons why guys decide not to come. I've been before. 2004, we won the Super Bowl with the Patriots. George W. Bush was the president. We all went.
Everybody went on your team?
I think everybody went. Maybe if there was some sort of scheduling thing, maybe guys didn't go. I think the bigger thing, the broader thing is that sometimes because of what happens, because of certain political stances, guys don't feel comfortable going. So I'm behind Malcolm. I'm behind him 100% if he doesn't want to go. I probably would go out of respect for the office, if not the man in the office. But I think it points to a larger atmosphere that we're in right now. Politics has become so divisive. We're in such a tribal mentality where people go to their different corners.
Can I read you the quote? It says, "I'm not very excited about getting my picture taken with him. It's not just worth my time. I'd rather spend my time working with whoever on these issues that we've been fighting for." Who are they fighting for? Who are you fighting for?
Well, Malcolm specifically, his issues have always been, most recently have been about criminal justice reform, bail reform, those types of things. Those are things that he's really passionate about. A number of guys in our league are very passionate about those things. If you go later in the interview, he actually says, if the president wanted to meet with me on those issues, I'd be glad to do so. He has been to the White House before. He doesn't want to go for the photo op because that's mostly what it is. There's not the time to actually converse with the president.
Right.
But he did say he would love to meet with the president on those issues. I mean, I would welcome an invitation to the White House to speak with him.
I would love for the national anthem.
Ma'am?
Has he stood up for the national anthem on all games?
He did stand up for the national anthem.
But I tell you what, I would hope the president takes him up on that.
Yeah, that would be
He
great.
seems like a very intelligent guy.
Definitely.
The other two players who are not going, Torrey Smith and Chris Long, the son of Howie Long. Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about a Philadelphia elementary school. It is Mitchell Elementary. According to Philly.com, it is in one of Philly's poorest neighborhoods. And Benjamin, what the principal has done is they said, okay, for every 8th grader who can graduate from 8th grade without getting into a fight, I'm going to give them $100. But here's the rub.
There's more interest in that over all those years.
Here's the problem, though. If one person in the class gets into a fight, nobody gets the money.
I mean, I think that we have 5 kids. My wife homeschools our oldest 2. I'd offer them $100 not to fight every day, because when I left here, they were fighting. Exactly. You know, I do think that there's different motivations for different students at different times, and I think it points to a larger issue of our education system. When you look at in Baltimore, we have kids who were cold and not able to really concentrate because they were cold in the actual school. So many of our schools are struggling for different reasons. I'm a strong believer that the home is really where that starts, and having parents that push you when it comes to education is really important. But hey, if you got to give the kids $100 for them not to fight, and you got the money to do so,
the principal says it's not a bribe; it's an investment in the kids.
It's an incentive, right?
How many kids are in the class? Do you know?
Don't know.
But Benjamin, here's the thing: in the big picture for parents and supervisors or teachers, should you pay someone to do something they're supposed to not do anyway? I mean, they're not supposed to. But you're not paying them to get A's. Yeah. You're paying them not to do something they're not supposed to do.
I agree, but we get paid not to do stuff all the time that we're not supposed to do. I mean, there's always those types of incentives, and you know, whether it's a trip. You know, some teachers say we're going to take you on a field trip to Washington D.C. You know, if you guys make grades. You know, that's just what she decided to do. But again, I have no problem with that. I do hope, however, that once the kids don't fight for a year, it becomes easier not to do.
And you're a free agent in a month. I would like to see you with the Giants, and Jillian wants to see you with the Eagles. And I say no. They got enough, okay? Can we keep with the Giants? They need a tight end.
You know, Eli's a good friend.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you guys have 2 quarterbacks.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
2 quality quarterbacks.
All right.
Who's going to start? What's your prediction for the Eagles next year?
Oh, that's a tough one. My prediction, however, is that it's Carson Wentz's team. Nick Foles came in and did a great job. Nick Foles is a guy who has been a Pro Bowler. He's not some guy coming off the bench that didn't have any experience. He did a phenomenal job coming in, and it was great to see that story. But I still think that they're invested in Carson Wentz, being that he was a rookie. He's the guy that led him to that point. But Foles is going to have a lot of options. Whether he stays with your Eagles or whether he goes somewhere else,
but also,
going to be.
Is Carson Wentz going to be ready to start the season?
Of course
MCL, ACL tear, both of them? I don't know.
An ACL now, you know, I tore my ACL as well back in 2004. The surgery was different then, but it takes about a year, but he'll definitely be back. He'll probably be back. He'll probably be back. I don't want to make any predictions for any Eagles fans out there, but I would imagine he will be back for probably part of the offseason, definitely for training camp.
And Benjamin, you will be back home with those kids who are being homeschooled right now very shortly, right?
Right. My wife is already up and getting the party started.
All right, it's physics today, kids.
Congratulations, 5 kids. How much fun. I bet that's great.
I'm going to bring them up here to the set one day.
Please do.
Let them hang out.
All right, good.
Jillian, you know, is behind you. She has more headlines for you.
How about that? All right, let's get you caught up on some of your other stories this morning that we're following. Starting here, President Trump unveiling his massive budget plan for 2019, including a $1.5 trillion infrastructure investment. He's now calling for support from Capitol Hill.
This is a common sense and bipartisan plan that every member of Congress should support. I look forward to working with them, and we're going to get the American people roads that are fixed and bridges that are fixed.
The president's budget proposal also includes funding for the military. The woman accused of stealing a newborn baby girl from a hospital and raising her as her own child is now confessing to her crime almost 20 years later. Gloria Williams could face up to 22 years in prison for posing as a nurse at a Florida hospital and walking out in 1998 with a baby named Kamaya Mobley. She pleaded guilty to kidnapping as well as interference charge, which could carry an additional 5 years. Williams was arrested last year after Mobley discovered the woman who raised her was not her mother, but her kidnapper. Consent doesn't matter as long as you're being inclusive. Just listen to this story. Canesville Elementary School officials in Utah telling 6th graders they must say yes when asked to a dance at their upcoming Valentine's Day party. A district official saying their strategy promotes kindness. Some parents are outraged about the idea. One mother saying it sends a bad message to both young girls and boys. Let's look at your headlines. I know, this is what I said in the 5 a.m. hour. Ainsley, I said I was a young girl once who went to dances. I would never want to be told you can't.
Of course,
No, the little girl needs to make her own choice, and you never want to teach your kid that they have to say yes to a man, a boy.
And guys got to get used to rejection because it happens a lot, not from personal experience.
Tell us what you think.
The others say that.
Square dancing is much easier. Remember that from junior high, where just everybody had a partner and you just dance the whole time. Much easier. What do you think about that? Email us, friends@foxnews.com.
All right, meanwhile, straight ahead. What was Susan Rice up to on the day of Donald Trump's inauguration? The email raising serious questions about Obama's national security advisor. Again, Judge Napolitano promises to either walk down the stairs or come through the wall. He's here to rewrite history.
Hey, Judge, good morning to you.
Hey, Judge.
And a brand new battle is brewing between Senators Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, but it's not what you expect. Stick around. Right back.